Hi, my name's Melanie Chambers, and I am a learning specialist in the Office of Academic Belonging and Learning Excellence, and I'm excited to be here.
And I'm Logan Haviland. I'm a PhD student in the Applied Economics department, teaching various intro to economics courses.
Hi, I'm Shalyn Drake. I teach for the aviation department. I'm a lecturer and the UAS certificate lead in Price.
Hi, I'm Julie Stevens. I'm out of the social work department. I'm out of the Ephraim campus, and I teach both in the bachelor's and the master's program for social work.
Hi, I'm Melissa Spencer, and I'm an adjunct with the Department of Social Work, primarily working on the Logan campus. However, most of my classes are electives, and so they are statewide.
All right, so we are going to share what the best teachers do, and we wanted to talk about how we don't want to eat the entire elephant. So we're going to explore how to break down what the best college teachers do. And it can feel like eating an entire elephant. But we wanted to explore what Ken Bain's book has insights for us, and incorporating different ways of taking little bits and pieces of the whole elephant to improve our teaching. So, my big question for you is, what have you seen the best college teachers do? So if you can encapsulate what characteristics and what practices that those influential college teachers have had in your academic history, and then thinking of ways that we can reproduce that with our students. So we're going to start with Logan talking about the critical learning environment, and then Shalyn's going to talk about expectations. Julie's going to break it down to the DNA with foundational steps, and then Melissa's going to talk about the 4 aspects of learning-based practice and evaluation.
All right, thank you. And one of the important aspects that Ken Bain explores in his book is how teachers can provide a natural critical learning environment by asking intriguing questions and problems. This can be related to one of the parts of an elephant, the trunk. And I want to invite you during this part of the presentation to think about what intriguing questions or problems can you present to your students to grab onto. And effective teachers don't just deliver information. Instead, they try to engage students with intriguing questions and problems. And this can occur throughout the class period, but can be especially powerful during the first beginning moments of class, at the beginning of class, by grabbing the attention of your students, just like how an elephant trunk would grab onto things. And these provocative questions or problems raise issues in ways that students had never quite thought about before. This sets the stage for the class and gives time to the students to really think about what they're going to be learning in that class period. And Ken Bain states that the best teachers tend to avoid giving their students the answer. Instead, they pose questions and problems that compel students to think critically. And in a natural critical learning environment, students are invited to think deeply and critically from the very beginning. And students often have some intuition over the topics and material that we present to them from their own lived experiences. By giving time and trusting your students with these questions and problems, it allows them to find connections in their lives that they may never have thought about before. And some of the other benefits of this approach, by incorporating these questions and problems in our classroom, it does much more than make our classes intriguing or novel, but it really helps students understand the why. As human beings, we're always asking about why this, why that. And this method really gives relevance to the topics for our students. When presented with these real world problems that they may realistically face, in a job after graduation, we provide them a solid connection and incentive for them to learn, to think critically and apply that material in their sphere of influence. And throughout the book, in his interviews and surveys, Ken Bain states that the best teachers often present problems that are complex, ambiguous, and connected to the real world, requiring students to use their knowledge in practical ways. One of the other lasting benefits of this approach is how it enables students to take ownership over their own learning. It's not a new or novel idea that humans are motivated. When humans are motivated and have ownership over something, they care much more deeply about it. And so when our students are involved and active participants in their own learning process, contributing and thinking, they of course are going to care more about that learning process. And Bain offers this reasoning that by starting with questions, teachers can create a sense of mystery and invite students to take ownership over their own learning journey, leaving students to actively engage and reflect on their own understanding. By starting with questions and problems, this is a very powerful way to create a natural critical learning environment. It engages students, connects learning to the real world, encourages autonomy, and fosters active and reflective learning. So bringing things back to my question at the beginning, what intriguing questions and problems can you present your students to grab onto?
When I started tackling the idea of expectations, I decided that it kind of felt like the whole torso of the elephant. And my question is, does setting and maintaining proper expectation feel like probably the largest chunk of the elephant? So I'm thinking perhaps we need to break that down even further. When we talk about the best college teachers expecting more from their students, the number one thing we're talking about is that it's not about giving more college work. It's about expecting more individual development from students, expecting more application of thinking skills from students, and setting applicable standards ourselves in our own courses. So first, the best college teachers look at each individual student and find that student's value and evaluate a student based on individual achievement. The downside is our grading system doesn't always help us to achieve that, but the best college teachers' attitudes can achieve it. Second, the best college teachers expect application of thinking skills, which really kind of ties back to the trunk. In other words, work backwards from your main goal. Chunk assessments and activities into application of thinking skills that are then related to that main goal. What assessment can you implement in a class of 200 that would allow each student to demonstrate an applicable thinking skill related to your final goal? Third, set applicable standards in the course itself. This may take a bit of rewording of the syllabus, for example. And yes, expectations can feel like the largest bite of the elephant if we look at all of that. But if there's one tiny single nibble you can take out of this whole bite, it's this. The best college teachers also have faith in students' ability to achieve. In other words, they think that students are capable of learning no matter their background. Ken Bain, in the book, What the Best College Teachers Do, talks about laying this foundation. He explains that trust, rejection of power, and setting standards that represented authentic goals rather than schoolwork are apparent in the kind of syllabus the best teachers tend to use. Start there. Trust the students. Reject the power dynamic in the class of professor over student and establish a team instead. Then set standards in the syllabus itself that represent authentic goals rather than an amount of schoolwork. There are 4 basic kind of ingredients we can think of as we break down that bite into authentic goals, and they are attitude, faith, willingness, and commitment. In the text, Bain talks about our attitude toward ourselves, our class, and our students, and that our job is to keep that attitude in check. Tweak our mindset as needed to apply appropriate attitudes to each of those. Faith is next, and something we already discussed as being the best bite to take. Have faith in your students and simply expect that they will do well, regardless of poor grades. Bain talks about expecting more from students with low grades, and sometimes he suggests that anonymous grading may be one way to help with that. The best college teachers also remember that true learning involves both personal and intellectual development on the part of the student. Don't ignore either of those. Use them. People can change, people can make good decisions, and we need to maintain that faith in other people. Next, he talks about having a willingness to consider possible changes to curriculum, to your syllabus, to your perspective, and a willingness to give a few things a shot when you're raising those expectations. Think about when it comes to the types of assignments or outcomes you want from your students. Consider how they're actually going to use the content you're teaching in real life and a job. What types of thinking can you engage them with? What reasons can you utilize for their thinking? And how can those types of thinking then show real learning? Bain introduces the idea of working backward to use these questions for yourself and your curriculum. And finally, the last thing is to have a commitment. It takes time to build this up. Be okay with little tiny bites of the elephant over a long period of time.
When we kind of looked at some of the structures of what the DNA would be, like we put in the foundations of expectations and from Logan's pieces, all of this structural design and questions that we're asking ourselves lead us to our meaning, right? Our understanding of what it means to teach and to learn. So we take this structure and then we start adding in these genetic code pieces. And these are the pieces that we get to bring in that are our learning experiences that we want to bring into the classroom, our assignments, our projects. All of these things are designed when we can answer, what does teaching mean to me? Other questions that we can ask as we're trying to figure out which genetic pieces we want to add in are, what do I want my students to do intellectually, physically, emotionally? What is it that I'm trying to get them to do that they can take with them? How can I support this process? And these are the ways in which we can design our learning experiences and our assignments. So a final project can be a great way, because then each code then leads up to the formation of a final project that helps our students learn. It gives them the opportunities to meet problems. How are they going to solve those? Do they need collaboration, right? And all of this is guided by what we're hoping that our students are getting out of this course. Why are they taking my class? And what am I setting them up for when they leave my class? And these are the ways in which we can build those projects so they're actually doing the skills that we're hoping that they take with them.
All right. Building off of this idea of assessing the elephant from a bite-sized perspective, we need to understand that every act that we engage in the classroom, whether it is in an online classroom space or a face-to-face classroom space, more traditional classroom space, or even the spaces where we're building the learning environment for our students, we need to understand that they ultimately spring from a wellspring and of concern for student learning. So all of our efforts towards making this elephant less overwhelming and making it into a bite-sized pieces is guided by the idea that we are concerned for our students' ability to learn, and we're setting the stage for them to be successful. So the four aspects of learning-based practice are to find out as much as possible about our students. Who are they? What is the context that they're coming into our course from? What is their previous experience? What have some of their lived experiences look like? They're much more than they're much more than the one-sided or two-sided figures that we're seeing in our classroom context. So it behooves us to be as educated as much as possible about our students. We want to understand them along those lines in their all of their complexity. What are some of the things that they're managing while they're pursuing their education? What is it about their lived experience or learned experience that brings them that uniquely positions them as a student? And then our goal as an instructor in this information gathering process is not to judge them, but to help them, to help guide them along their way in their learning journey. And then we also want to emphasize that the very act of being involved in our course and in the class has actually changed our students, whether it's in formative ways or summative ways. We want to be able to emphasize at the end process that our students have taken something or they have changed something, but that change has occurred as a result of being part of our course. And so one of the things we engage in when we're assessing our teaching practice, after you have a really good meal, sometimes you sit back and kind of think about all the great aspects of that meal. And so going along with our analogy of breaking down this elephant and eating it, we want to assess our teaching practice by assessing 4 main things. One, was the material worth learning? And I think that's been addressed really well by my prior colleagues as far as context. And then, are my students learning what the course is supposedly teaching? Very often, mid-semester, it becomes apparent that what we meant to teach and what we ended up teaching are not necessarily the same things. And so it's really helpful as we're engaging in assessing our practice and really wanting to provide the best quality education we can for our students, to realize that sometimes there are unexpected things that they learn in our course, and we need to be able to be open and honest with ourselves about those things and then build from them as we move forward. And then this is, I think, the hardest one, and that is, am I helping and encouraging the students to learn, or did they learn in spite of me? So just radical honesty with ourselves. Was it my efforts that helped them learn the goals of the course, or was it something that they picked up despite my efforts? It's just something that we need to be really open and willing to assess as we assess the quality of the meal. And then the very last one is, have I harmed my students? And I think it's very fair to say that none of us that engage in teaching practice have any intention whatsoever of ever being harmful in any context. But it is part of being radically honest with yourself as an instructor, whether that has actually occurred.
All right, I loved this quote. It's at the end of the book. It says, excellent teachers develop their abilities through constant self-evaluation, reflection, and the willingness to change. And I think that is incorporated in all of the practices that help us become better or best college teachers. So my question, now that you've heard from everybody, is how are you going to eat your teaching elephant? What bite are you going to take and apply to your teaching? So here's a few ways to have that bite. First off, thinking about the positives. What makes you an exceptional college teacher? And I think just you watching this video is an indication that you're seeking to be a better college teacher. And then reflect on your current teaching experience. I think we're all our worst critics when we think of all the things that could be improved, but start with your strengths. What's going well? And then you can build on those or think of those improvements, and then apply one bite of the elephant of all these ideas into your teaching that addresses that area of improvement you want to start on. The other part of eating an elephant one bite at a time is that if you try to eat the whole thing, it can be a disaster. And I've been in this boat where I see all the wonderful things and want to change it all, but that one bite really makes a difference. And so after you've implemented that one bite, take some time to decide what impact it's had on those students. You can decide if it's been if the intention was good, but maybe the outcome wasn't as great, you can make some adjustments to increase the impact of positive changes. So those are just some ideas of ways to incorporate all of these wonderful things. And we want to thank you for taking the time to watch this. And if you have any questions for any of us, we have our emails here. So thank you so much for participating.